Good morning, afternoon, evening. Welcome to MSP Community Live. So my name is Matt, here with Josh. And as always, any show I'm on means Ray's not here. We were just together last Friday, and we didn't record anything. We attempted to. We thought we might do it, and the curse continues. Ray and I cannot appear in the same place at once. It's impossible. Um, so that aside, how's your week going, Josh?
The week has been going good. Last weekend, I think I mentioned, so I was in the woods here of southern Wisconsin slash northern Illinois. Um, and I was working aid station as the aid station chef and had a really great time. We were unanimously voted the best aid station of the Ultra, so I'll take that.
Nice.
So I love trail running and being on the trail, so that was good. This morning started off fantastic. Had my best run in a few months. Nice early morning 5K, and I figured out that I've been brewing my coffee wrong the last couple months. On my new coffee machine, there's like different settings, and I've been using the travel mug setting, which gives me a full mug. But yesterday I noticed I was like, this is kind of light. And, I was putting 2 scoops of coffee. So this morning I did like a little over a scoop and then just put it on the mug setting. The flavors are so much better. Like this is life-changing coffee here. So I'm ready to go. Like I'm wired. This is a great morning.
So this time we're both wired instead of just me. So that's good. As you can see, I have the very fancy McDonald's coffee today. Ran out quickly this morning.
Oh, dude, I'm on that bougie coffee train. I got some craft beans. I think they came from our friend Kiga, aka Brandon, who may or not be watching, but I do enjoy a good bougie bean. Although at 4 a.m. on my aid station, I had to stick with some Folgers, and it worked in the time, but not my
It's
go-to.
caffeinated, right? That's all that matters. I'm not picky. I like the fancy coffee, but I'm just as happy with Dunkin' Donuts, 7-Eleven, whatever, as long as it's good, as long as it's caffeinated. Um, okay. So aside from all that, ChannelCon was a lot of fun last week, so that was my week, and then catching up was this week. Let's get to some MSP Community Live Reddit stories. Is nobody wants to hear me talk about coffee all day, or worse, hear us talk about running all day, which we could totally do.
Yeah, but instead we're going to go in a different direction. We're going to talk about the most insane client requests and ideas. So this is a super
Oh
fun
man.
thread. I would suggest reading through this thread because there are some pretty great ones in here. This particular one the OP posted looks like the guy tried hooking up a battery directly to the motherboard, which is incredible.
Yeah, that's
But
not gonna work.
but yeah, what a good way to start. So Matt, what is your insane client story or the request?
Insane client. Yeah, those are two different questions. In fact, I might. Oh man, I'm gonna be that guy. Yes, I did have some IT requests, and quite a few of them actually that didn't really make sense in the context of what does it make sense to do from a technology perspective. Whenever I got one of those, though, I tried to remind myself of what the client is ultimately trying to accomplish here. And by that, I mean, it was hard for me to really say, hey, this is an insane request, even though the tactical way to get there was insane. But ultimately, they were really trying to ask me about something like, how can I improve my uptime, or how can I um, what one that is notable and involved a huge amount of static routes and weird dark fiber and all sorts of strange redundancy, when the solution was just to get um, you know dynamic routing in place and better internet connections at all these locations. All sorts of stuff around weird backup strategies and printers. None are really coming to mind as particularly egregious as far as what the technical ask was. I think one time somebody asked if I could make a program from 1995 installing Windows 10, and that didn't work. Windows 7 it used to, because you could still get 32-bit Windows, and you could run Windows on Windows 16-bit if you had to. And when
Yeah.
64 became the only option, you couldn't do that anymore.
You just install Windows 32 twice, and that's how you got the 64.
Yeah. So maybe I'm like a party pooper or not fun tech anymore, but whenever I see that kind of thread, I really tried to remind myself that these guys just don't know IT. It's like me. I don't know anything about cars really, and like if I take it to the mechanic and I might say something like, "Man, it's making a noise when I turn right" or something. If I offered any kind of suggestion, they would be talking about me and what's your most insane thing a customer ever said.
Yeah, as long as I've been in this, I haven't had any like super insane requests like trying to solder a battery to the cable. Probably the weirdest one that comes to mind is a guy who would order like 40 computers at once and then just store them in a storage room, and he'd only give them to employees as their computer died, not realizing that like those depreciate, like just because they're not being used, they're still depreciating in that storage room, and it's, you need to get on an upgrade cycle and
Yeah.
take care of things before they die. But that's just that type of client he was. I mean, as far as the other one that comes to mind is he ran a e-commerce site, and every time anything at all happened, like Word was locking up or like printer wasn't working, they'd call us up saying, in quote, "We're dead in the water. We're losing millions of dollars by the minute because we can't do this." And everything was an emergency. And the problem is, like, if everything's an emergency, nothing's an emergency. And you'd go
Mm-hmm.
there and you'd fix it, and he'd be like your best friend. But he had a side gig where he does photography, and it was really cool stuff. And had a request saying, "Hey, I have a new studio and a new dark room, and I need my stuff hooked up for it." I'm like, it was a little bit outside the scope, but that was a pretty cool request to go see that. But yeah, thankfully, nothing like some of the stuff in the threads here.
So I have what I think might be a more interesting thread or direction on this. It makes me think, what's something weird that you've seen happen, or that after digging, you uncovered as far as what the issue was. I'll share one I shared at GeekCon in one of my presentations, and that was, we had a firewall or a server that no one could locate ever, and like physically, like nobody knew where it was. And after tons of investigation, it turned out that someone had installed Windows onto a 1U firewall sitting in the rack. Stuff like that. Or
That's
let me
amazing.
ask you, Josh. Have you seen anything? I'm
Yes.
sure you have. You've been in IT long enough. What's something weird, just not even what the client asked, but something you ran into that's strange or didn't make sense?
So I was dispatched to a school, and this was like a 3-hour drive for networking issues. They're having networking issues, and that's all that was described. And I go on site, and of course, the first thing you do is you run a little IP config, and it came back, 169.168 some dots or whatever. And I'm like, well, this is your issue. You're not getting a DHCP address. And then I'm like, but wait a second, you can get on the internet. How are you getting an IP address, but you're still able to get on that? So I went to a couple other ones, ran the IP configs, and they're like, all giving me this. And I'm like, really confused. I'm like, why is this a thing? So I go on the server, and that was the DHCP scope. Like, what? What are you doing?
I mean, I guess it's technically valid, just kind of a weird design decision.
Oh my god, why would you do that though? So that was fixed. I also enjoyed the hey, we need to extend our Wi-Fi, so we're just gonna buy more Wi-Fi routers, but we're just gonna go to like Best Buy and like buy a Netgear and then a TP-Link and just put them over here, and then just have like 3 separate wireless. I've seen that more times than one. I've gone to more than one place where they've let their internal IT person go and they bring in us as an MSP. And it was clear that the internal IT guy just used this as like his IT playground. There was like a screen printing shop with
Yep.
30 employees, pretty small business. And this dude had 12 VMs, like 4 different like VLAN, like 4 different segregated VLANs for all of this stuff. And it's like, man, this is so unnecessary. And as part of the architect design, I was like, okay, well, he had 2 different or three different hosts running all of these VMs. And I was like,
yeah.
okay, well, based off of my understanding of your network, what we can do, like, I can get you down to 3 and like we can simplify the network. And I'm a security guy. Like, I'm all about the segregated VLANs, but I'm also like, I've been in IT and I've been in business. Like, you have to make it like usable, right? And realistic. So,
Yeah, or like the classic, yes, we separated all the VLANs with totally wide open ACLs between all of them. So
yeah.
what did you actually get security wise?
Nothing. Ran into
Smaller
that
broadcast
multiple
domains, I
times.
guess.
Yep.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot. I swear, not just VLANs, but there have been so many environments I walked into where I swear somebody just like read about something and then went crazy doing it. Like VLANs is one thing. Like somebody made multiple AD domains for some reason, and like there was absolutely no reason to do this. It was like a 50-person company. Um, all the time, I swear, you can almost watch the sysadmin progressing through whatever book they were reading, and you can see where they stopped,
Yeah.
and just all through the whole network. I used to see that with GPOs a lot. You'd open like Group Policy Management Console and see like 100 GPOs, and I'm like, you guys are a 25-person company.
I have I have another good one on the security side that'll just make you like head desk. So, client who has they have 2 sites, so one in this state, one a couple states away, but literally just 2 sites. And these guys had very like they're a bigger operation, don't get me wrong, but their networking was needlessly complicated. I mean, they're doing BGP, OSPF, and it's like, dude, you don't need to do this, right? Like, my networking skill, I would say, is like medium to medium high, and it's like, we can simplify this in a way that I can understand it, but doesn't need to be that complicated. But in any case, for compliance reasons, they wanted to set up a 4G backbone because they just had like ASA and then like a core switch, and they had all of these routing between the two. But if they had multiple ISP circuits, but then if the ISP went down, they needed a backup. It was compliance related due to the industry that they were in. So they needed 4G just in case the ISP, like a fiber seeking backhoe goes in. So we did all this stuff, architected this really great solution. Like, okay, cool. Like we'll simplify this. We'll put in some Meraki's that have the 4G backbone, the 4G backup on it. We can simplify your networking, do all this, like this whole like kit and caboodle. And they're like, well, no, because we can't be down for more than X hours. And it's like, well, you got to fix this at one point, right? Like, let's, we'll do it overnight. We'll do it as quickly as possible, but we're going to run into some stuff because, again, whoever set up your network was just a Cisco wizard who doesn't exist anymore and used it as this playground. But instead, the call from a higher up was made, and he was like, we just need to check this box for compliance. So I want you to plug a Meraki on this end and plug a Meraki on that end, and then just make sure that there's a green check mark where they can talk to each other. And we're like, well, hold on, it's not going to be connected to anything. He's like, just give me the check mark so I can check off compliance. Okay.
So we could go down that road.
Literally did that. Hey, it checked the checkbox off for compliance. Guess who texted me 6 months later when their circuit, their ISP was going down for 8 hours for maintenance, and all of a sudden they needed that 4G. And I get the text, hey, I know you no longer help us, but do you remember the config for this? And I just started laughing. So, yeah.
You reminded me of that old networking joke. If you're ever lost in the woods, bury some fiber, wait for the backhoe to show up.
Yes.
Okay. We should probably move on to the next story before this entire episode just turns into us talking about weird stuff that has happened. That may be a good episode at some point, though.
It would. But yeah, let's get into the next one, and it's kind of a continuation. Why won't customers listen? So this particular it would be say, hey, these guys need a new server. They don't want to pay for a server. Can they use a desktop? No. Well, the client just ended up using a desktop. They need backup. We can back up data to the cloud. Nope. You need a backup device. And then, basically every time the client says they want to do something, they're not listening. So who's at fault in this, the MSP or the customer?
Both.
Yeah.
So go back to what I said before, where I know nothing about cars, like nothing. And if I go to, I guess I know how to drive one. That's about it. If I go to my mechanic and say, I want to do this dumb thing, two things need to happen. One is the mechanic has a responsibility to tell me that's a dumb thing to do. And depending on how dumb it is, he should either not do it at all, like simply refuse to do it because I will regret it later, or be very, very clear that this is a bad idea and say, are you sure you wanted to pay me to do this anyway? And it really depends on the request, right? And what I mean by that is if you have a client that, just to use the example we always talk about, that absolutely refuses to turn on MFA, for example, you can't really in good conscience do that, right? You can't say, okay, client, you're right. We're not going to do this. If you have a client that wants to, from a risk management perspective, accept a risky architecture for the sake of saving dollars and you've warned them, then sometimes that's okay if you've warned them. I personally err on the side of not doing stuff like this and insisting on doing it the right way. But at some point, you're making a decision. Client, are you from an informed perspective accepting this risk, or is it you failed to really explain why this is a bad idea? So it's not a cut and dried, right? There
Yep.
are some examples where it's okay, and there are some where you got to draw a line in the sand.
I mean, 100%. Like, I feel it is definitely on both, and you have the ability to let a client go. I mean, you're trying to be a partner with your client, and if the client isn't listening to your advice, if they're not taking stuff, then they're not a good partner. A partner is a two-way street. Now, I
Yeah.
understand if you're a smaller MSP or the one-man band just starting out, you need, whatever income and revenue you can get. So you might not be in a position where it's easy to say that, but ultimately that's what we need to be at, right? Is if a client is doing stuff that is too risky or goes outside your norm and your standard, I mean, then it becomes a liability on your part, maybe not legally, but inevitably when something goes wrong, you're going to be involved in one way, shape, or another. Like it's, being the partner, you're going to get dragged into it.
Yes.
If all of a sudden Matt is like, hey, I'm gonna build a car, and I'm like, Matt, you don't know anything about cars. Like,
Yeah.
why are you doing
If I
this?
say
Don't do
that,
this,
stop
right?
me, please.
And I'm like, hey, I can help you. Like, I know a bit about cars. I really don't, but for the sake of an analogy, let's just keep it going, right? So I'm like, Matt, like, this is what you need to buy your car. Matt guy's like, I got this, right? And I see him out in the driveway, and he's like putting this car together, and like I continue to give him advice, and Matt's like, no, I got this, right? And then Matt takes his car and goes out, and he makes it down the block, and it just explodes. And now Matt's like hospitalized, right? But like,
This is a morbid analogy, Josh. I
I
gotta
could have
say.
I could have stopped him in any way, shape, or time, but now it's too late. And now, like, because I'm in that's my partner. Like, I gotta help him out. Now I'm dragged into this situation, and it's like there's all these red flags here this whole time. It could have been stopped before it got to this point, but because I wasn't willing to cut that relationship for whatever inconvenience or anything like that, so yeah, it is definitely, it is the client. I mean, it's their infrastructure, it's their business. Obviously they're the ones who take the brunt of it, but it is also on you as the MSP to stick up for yourself and basically hey, like, we can't do this.
Yeah. And you raise a really good point. So I mentioned at some point you just have to let the client make the informed risk. How many times has the client remembered that they accepted that risk 6 months down the line where their decision blew up, right? Never.
Yeah,
Never.
not
So
until
keep that in mind.
not until it blows up, and then you're like, oh, we told you so. So continue to bring it up. Have a risk register when you're doing your QBRs or business reviews, whatever you want to call them. Like, hey, we accepted this risk. Like, what is our plan? Is it still accepted? Make sure that they're continually aware of it. So it shouldn't just be we accept it, one and done. There should be a continual roadmap on, are we in a place where we can look at this or address it, or, what are we doing? Or are we just, keeping it on the risk register?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And try to understand why the client wants to go this direction. Is it that they read something? Is it simply a financially driven thing? Like they can't afford to do it the right way. In that case, maybe have a conversation about waiting until you can do it the right way. Or sometimes you just need to, right? It's simply a cost you can't avoid. But I agree. I think what we've determined, Josh, is the answer to every question we ever talk about is it depends. And this one is no different. But I agree. Most of the time, or a lot of the time, this turns into you got to do it the right way or not at all, or like let us know when you're ready to do it correctly. It becomes a support nightmare. It becomes a liability, not just financially, like you mentioned, reputationally. They'll blame you when it goes badly. Just for a lot of reasons. And yes, if you ever hear me talking about building a car, please do not let me do that. I will go buy one.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to see it though, like out of just morbid curiosity. I would like to see the Matmobile.
It would be like Micro Machines with like my name written on it or something. That's the best I could do. Okay, let's move on before I don't know anything about cars. Okay, it's been said. I won't even try to talk about it.
All right, let's go into the next one. So this one is more about the people side than the tech side. So this person, burnout and depression, he misses working with people. So he joined a relatively small MSP a few years ago. It was just him, his boss, 2 other part-time employees, and they only supported about 15 businesses, so just enough to make a profit. But since then, the 2 part-timers have left. The boss inherited a large amount of property, and he is like, hey, this company is yours. He's doing it for 2 months. And it's been manageable. He hasn't hired anyone out. But he's just basically, hey, I'm alone, and I miss a structured environment. I miss coworkers that he can talk with. He's had calls from the clients, but he's basically feeling like, where's the social interaction? Getting that burnout. So what would be your advice to this person?
So it's a couple of things. It sounds like we're starting from the premise, and we can go down this road if it makes sense. But I get the impression from this post that we're starting from the position that it's either not financially viable, or there's not enough work, or it doesn't make sense for him to have an employee or a team. So we'll put that issue off to the side for now and assume that that's correct, that he can't afford to hire anyone, or there's not enough work or something like that. If you find yourself in that position, then it's time to start trying to get out there and getting your social interaction from other places. And if you want to take me as an example, I'm the opposite in that, right? I go to events and talk to people and socialize all day, and am then completely wiped out. I need the alone time to go afterwards. So like I go out on my runs and do other like solo hobbies, and that's my alone time. This person, I think, needs to do the opposite, right? Realizing that, he's not going to get the social interaction at work. How do I fill that need, right? You start doing things in the evenings. You start going out to lunch with people, going out to lunch with prospects, joining groups, clubs, hanging out with friends, right? Like, I feel like the only real answer, unless there's like enough business to start having a team and start having some structure, is you just need to get your social interaction somewhere else. One thing that sometimes would help me, especially now that I work remotely, is I will occasionally go work at a coffee shop or a co-working space or something like that, just to get a little bit of social interaction. Co-working spaces can be great for that because you kind of get to know the people who work there. Even if you're doing it just for a day, you might see the same people over and over again. Many of them have like leased offices though, right? So you can get a dedicated workspace next to somebody else who has a dedicated workspace, and you kind of become friends with them, and just talk about what's going on, like on the way to the coffee machine and stuff like that. That can be a way to get some social interaction. But to me, this just boils down to you got to find a way to interact with people, and if it's not at work, right? We'll assume that that's the reality. Then lunch, after work, hobbies, or maybe make it during work by working someplace where there's people. Like there's not a magic answer other than go where people are if
Yep.
you need people time.
Well, and I mean, to this particular person, like you hit it perfectly. If you're not getting it at work, go after work. But if you need that interaction during work, then go and visit your clients. I mean, that was my favorite part of working for the smaller MSPs that I worked for. Is I would love going on site to clients, and obviously depending on the contracts and stuff like that, but just going there, like, hey, I could fix this remotely, but I'm gonna make a visit and just sit and BS with them and build that relationship with it. I mean, when I moved on from that particular MSP, I mean, I had a couple clients who were like, well, we miss we miss Josh because he'd always come in and talk with us and visit. So go out and just start building those relationships. Invite, like you said, the prospects to lunch. Go have lunch with those. Network. Find a whatever business referrals group, chamber of commerce, whatever it may be. Host those networking events. Local communities. Like, I'm a very extroverted person, and I work remotely. So I look forward to like our daily stand-ups. One thing that my MSP does that is great is we're really focused on culture and team building. And even though we're all remote, we try to have with our morning stand-ups, we like make it a little fun. Hey, what's important for the day? What's the announcements? And then we'll do like focus recognition, things like that. Excuse me. And then we do a lunch and learn once a week where, hey, this is open for 15 minutes before, just for socializing. And not everyone takes advantage of it, but some do. We have an open door hangout spot where like we just go into this channel, and now there's 6 to 9 of us that are just hanging out while we're working on tickets and things like that. So building just having that, like, if you can't get it in person, you can at least go over to Teams or Zoom or whatever. And then, to your point as well, like, if you're not finding it at work, then finding those extracurricular things, joining whatever hobbies you're in. There's multiple MSPs like in the Discord, like shout out to the tech degenerates. They just had a happy hour last night. I couldn't join because I was podcasting with my friends, but I'm regularly join that as well. So there's all of these avenues out there. Find whatever it takes. I mean, doing this with you, it's social interaction that I look forward to. So
social nerds, can you believe
exactly, it? So yeah, just it's not going to come to you, but you got to go find it. And there's plenty of opportunities for you to go find it out there.
Well, I think your last sentence totally nailed it. It will not come to you. One thing though, I do want to, it's probably not an issue for like if you're just a solo or the owner. But we did at my organization have an issue with techs wanting to go on site too much. Right there is a point where you would look at the timesheet at the end of the day, and all of a sudden it was like 8 hours of on site, and you realized they worked on like one thing while they were there, and meanwhile their queue is backed up because they said, hey, let me go on site and just like kind of hang out all day and call it relationship. And next thing you know, not much is getting done. So just be cognizant of that. Not really an issue if you're, if it's just you. The other thing I'll point out with this is that I had a client that I had a very unique relationship with, like we became friends, and they used to like me to come hang out and work at their office. Like, it was really cool. I would grab an empty desk or like grab an empty office in their floor plan and just like do work for me and other clients. They loved it. And if anything came up with them, hey, I was right there. But otherwise they knew I was just there, answering emails and such. And that was actually really nice. When I felt like I needed some interaction time, I would just go hang out there. Now, not feasible. And even me, I only had like one client I could really do this with, but that is an option if you have like a close relationship with someone.
Yeah, and to Dr. Zoidberg's point, my former tech lead was banned from on sites because of that, because he was too friendly and he spent too much time. I can definitely see it being a problem, but I mean, just being conscious of like, hey, if we're short staffed or if it's a busy day, don't do that. We had a client who operated the local movie theater, and I loved going there because we would just hang out and BS for at least 2 hours. Like it would be like a 15-minute fix, but it was like,
Yeah.
hey, a tour behind the scenes, like talking about the movie theaters, what's going on, him ranting about things. Like I'd get to go above into like the projector rooms and like do all of this cool stuff, right? And I was like, okay, well, I knew I'm going on site for this, like, but I'm gonna make sure, like, hey, can I get to this tomorrow? Like, find a time where it was appropriate to spend that amount of time there, so that way you don't get banned from on sites by Dr. Zoidberg,
So I have one last thing to Dean's point though, and it's kind of a meta thing now that we're down this road of like spending too much time on site. Techs will do that if the only thing you care about is utilization, because they'll be able to go and say, hey, here's a 6-hour time block because I was on site, and just put that in there. Hey, on-site visit, and list off the kind of all the stuff they did. That can be a sign that maybe you're not managing their workload appropriately, or that you're looking at the wrong metrics, or like literally only caring about billable percentage and nothing else. Because when we really dug into it, one of the reasons that we had guys going on site so much is because it was an easy way to get them to their 85% utilization.
That's man. That could be a rant for another day on that.
Yeah, we'll put that to the side.
One of my good friends got a job at another MSP, and he was complaining about that. Well, they expect us to be 90% utilized, and I'm like, that irks me so damn much. Like, I mean, obviously, yes, you want your techs to be doing their job and to be productive, but like, if the techs don't have work, what the hell are they supposed to do, right? Like, it's not on them to have that 90% utilized, but we can
Ooh, spicy rant.
we can go down that route another time.
Okay, before we dive into that rant, because yes, this would turn into a long discussion on what it makes sense to measure. Maybe we'll have that episode one day. Actually, that'd be a good thing to talk about with like a bigger group. That would be fun.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's move on before we start this conversation.
All right. So this particular one, is it a standard to do a risk assessment before you onboard a new client? Many MSPs I've been in contact with start new client relationships with a risk assessment, so they know the scope of the details. What does everyone do? If you start with risk assessments, what tool? We don't need to get into the tool, but is this something that you did, Matt?
You know what I didn't do? Called sales assessments, risk assessments. That was the first issue.
Yeah, I have a soapbox for this. So,
So yes, for a new client or a new prospect, we would often, like a pre-sales assessment or something like that. You go in and you take a look at the environment and figure out what needs to happen to get them into a supportable state. Now, the risk here, no pun intended, is that sometimes prospects are calling you up just to do that, to figure out what they need their in-house person to do, or the MSP that they're actually looking to work with to do. So you have to be very careful about giving proposals for that stuff. I've heard some orgs try and charge for that and take it off. It kind of depends on what the deliverable is. And what I mean by that is, if you're going to charge for the assessment, you do have to give them, I feel, a quote that's implementable and you can give to someone else, and because you're charging for it, right? If you're not charging for it, you can kind of just say startup project is replace server and migrate to 365, and not give a lot of details, because the details are what the value you're providing. I won't name tool names. You guys probably all know the tools I'm thinking of anyway. I was not a big believer in the types of tools that would basically like do a network scan. You could see the air quotes depending on my camera angle, and print out that like 500 pages of quasi useless information, maybe like one page of it had useful data on it, and scaring the cut. Like I don't like that kind of assessment. One, I don't like running tools on clients I'm not actively supporting. That's issue number one. And two, it's just such a FUD scare tactic, right? Just go have a conversation about their business objectives and the potential architecture problems with it. And the other thing with that, by the way, is I'm sorry, I'm kind of soapboxing. I guess I had more coffee than I thought. The other thing with that is be very careful when you go in and propose that. Sometimes they're not in the cloud for a reason, or they're not doing the thing that you think they should be doing for a good reason, and they tried that and it didn't work, or they had some kind of software incompatibility, or the way that the business operates didn't work with the traditional solution or what you think is the obvious answer. And there are few better ways to take yourself out of the running for a sale than to sit down with the prospect, give your proposal, and have the answer be, yeah, we tried that. It didn't work. That's why we're talking to someone else, right? So just be careful. Like you're not necessarily the only person they've talked to, and be aware that the standard answer isn't always the answer for everyone.
Yep.
Very long-winded answer to the question. I think I went in like 12 directions, but I will.
All right.
we'll turn it over to you, Josh, for your take.
So you stole the first point I was going to make. Is a sales assessment is not a risk assessment, right? Your sales assessment is literally, it should be sitting down, interviewing the client. I mean, just like a job interview, you need to be interviewing the client just as much as they're interviewing you to make sure that it's a good fit, a good partnership. And then, obviously finding their pain points. Our onboarding process is really intensive. So usually, I mean, we meet with the client, get all this information, users, locations, how they currently do things, how are they set up, all of this stuff. You're getting all this information, and then I run like a brief sales assessment test to make sure that their network isn't in shambles. It's nothing intensive. And then as we go for onboarding, we have a huge onboarding checklist where we're looking at all of this stuff here, configurations, etc., to make these recommendations. Now, let's go on to the risk assessment. That's something completely different from a sales assessment. Typically, and I would suggest that this be paid. And what a risk assessment isn't is when you send them a little questionnaire and say, hey, fill this out. And then all your risk assessment is, well, based off of these, this is your risk. That's not a risk assessment. And it's ridiculous that people can charge for those and it be acceptable. Because you're just grabbing a template from whatever the hell tool you're using, sending it, and then saying, okay, yep, this is your risk, this is your gaps, we can help you. There's way more to it than that. So I'm sorry, getting a little heated, but there's just too much of that out there in the security world, right? If you're going to do a paid risk assessment, and then also to Matt's point too, like the fear, okay, cool. I can come in and I can run a vulnerability scanner. I can run the dark web scanner, and I can scare the hell out of you saying, oh, you got 10,000 vulnerabilities. All your stuff is found in the dark web. You're going to lose clients just as well as you're going to gain them with that. Again, it's not realistic, right? So what I recommend, and this is what we're doing, is it basically a security posture assessment. And it's a combination of all of those things. It's not just one of them. Yes, there's some questions, but then it is paid. So we're going to deploy some tools. We're going to get a lay of the land, look at the configurations, look at Active Directory, make concrete, like, hey, you don't have MFA, or hey, this port is open, or yes, vulnerability scanning does need to be a part of that in way, shape, or form. But I'm not going to give them the thing that says, hey, you have 10,000 vulnerabilities. It's going to be, hey, you do have some vulnerabilities. These are the most exploited. This is the ranking of, like, based on all the information we've gathered, this is your security posture. This would be our, our recommendations. This would be the roadmap we'd want to put you on. And then it goes into, you get that back if you have like a lasting relationship, or if they don't, then you've paid for the assessment and they can bring it back in-house, and now they have something to go off of on what they need to do. But don't just sit there and give a questionnaire assessment and call it good and call that a risk assessment, because it's not. It's a self-attestation that's just being done by a third party, and it's not a true risk assessment.
Yes. No disagreement here.
That's my soapbox. Stop it. We're better. Do the work.
So all that being said, I think the answer to the original question is for both of us, I'm assuming, yes, there is some kind of investigation that happens before onboarding a customer, because you might discover some kind of, some orgs call them true up projects or initial projects or something like that that has to get done. Um, but it's not a risk assessment, and just depending on your organization, it may involve a tool, it may involve looking at things in interview, but that's different from an ongoing risk management program or risk assessment, I think is the answer. So the very short answer is yes, most orgs will do some kind of investigation, and how deep it goes depends usually on if you're charging for it or not.
Yep. But I wouldn't just blindly walk into an environment and say yes, we can do it. Have some sort of assessment, whatever that may be.
Yeah.
But, all right, well, let's get to our last one here, and this last one is pretty fun. So this one's titled "Text Watching Games and Other Entertainment at Work." So he owns a small MSP with 5 employees, and he recently has been walking into Tech's office and finding him watching streaming videos of gaming from their cell phones. It seems wildly inappropriate when the tech is trying to diagnose an issue and not making headway. He's considering a policy to ban personal entertainment, but he doesn't want to ruin any culture. So I'm going to take the lead on this one here. Come on,
because I keep stealing all the good ideas too. So you should go first.
Like tell me you don't connect with your employees, without telling me. And I mean that a little bit in jest, but like, especially the younger crowd, like this is what they do. We're not watching, Netflix or whatever. Like Twitch is like, or I think Twitch is still the thing. I don't know. It's not my cup of tea, but plenty of my other friends do it. I'll watch speed runs or something on gaming. Like it's just background noise. It's just whatever entertainment. Like I can't work in silence. My ADHD, works better if I have some sort of background noise distraction, whether it is games, whether it is music, whether it is whatever YouTube video of what I'm watching, whether it's the Olympics, right? It shouldn't matter what it is, as long as it's not, inappropriate. Obviously we don't want to be work inappropriate HR violations, but it's no different than any other sort of entertainment out there. Yeah. And especially with the younger crowd, it's the norm. I mean, the guys are talking about their favorite video game players, their favorite streamers. I mean, it's their version of Netflix. It's their version of whatever, insert whatever typically the older crowd would watch, right? So the fact that it's streaming games is irrelevant. Would you have the same reaction if you walked in and they were watching Futurama or The Office or a YouTube video about whatever? Like it doesn't matter. Like it's just background name. So get with the times, old man.
So I do. So I agree with you with one. I don't know if it's an exception or a point, and that is, if I found that the part of that post that concerns me is that he says they're watching stuff all day and not making progress on critical issues. And I would want to understand whether he's like whether it's being treated as background, or if it's that the person is becoming focused on whatever he's watching to the point where other work isn't getting done. So I think that falls into the it's okay as long as your work is still getting done, and if it becomes a distraction, then it's a different conversation. But I certainly agree with not like blanket banning that stuff. I mean, I don't watch Twitch or anything. I don't even watch Netflix really during the day. I have some tunes on. That's about it. So I guess I'm officially old now. The other thing that I would mention though is maybe this is just me. I wouldn't have it visible or around, like if there's a client at the office or at clients, or like if somehow it can be heard over the phone or anything like that. Just to me, that feels unprofessional. Maybe depending on what client you're talking to, it could be okay. But I think ultimately I'm mostly agreeing with you by saying if it doesn't impede getting your work done, I don't really have an issue with it.
Yeah, I now agree with those two. Like, you don't If you do have clients in the office, etc. But the other side too is, I mean, it could be his what do you call that? The rubber duck moment where he's like stuck on something, so he's just
Yeah.
like, I need to turn my brain off, and then you'll have that aha moment at some point. But yeah, if work isn't getting done, that's a separate issue. And again, the issue isn't he's watching games on his phone. The issue is that work isn't being done, and regardless of what the distraction is, regardless of you need to treat, hey, why isn't this getting done? And because sometimes if you get really into music, right? So like if you're gonna like, hey, we're gonna ban Twitch, well then they're just gonna go find something else, and we're not
Yeah.
just covering the root cause of why it's not getting done. So yeah, so
Yeah,
completely,
exactly. It's no different than
separate.
reading, a website or whatever you might be doing, right? Like, so
Yeah.
I totally get that. I certainly would not blanket ban Twitch, although I'm not going to be watching it anytime soon. So if you're on Twitch, I won't see you. But like and I almost said surf the web. Nobody says that anymore either. I feel old on this show. I get it. I think we agree.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's the last story. Anything coming up this week that you want to mention? I'll mention one thing. Today is the last day to submit something for IT Nation Connect in November. If you are attending or if you're planning on wanting to speak at that event, get your submission in today. Is the call for speakers closes end of day today? Josh, anything noteworthy?
Yeah.
Anything coming up?
Yeah, if you guys want to see more of me, and come on, who doesn't? I'll be on Team Tim Live at 1 o'clock Central today, going over
Nice.
the IR game. So with Tim Golden, Bob Miller. So I know I've plugged it quite a few times on this show, but the IR game is a blast. It's a lot of fun. Matt, we need to get you on there. But we take people through a terrible day, and we make we see what kind of decision making that they have when they're under the gun, and have some laughs and learn a lot. So we'll be on Team Tim Live for that this week.
Nice. Well, all right. So thank you for tuning in, and until next time.